Hey there, Scott here from SocialNRG Presents, and thank you so much for joining us. We've got another great episode with you, this time from the world of rock and roll. Our guest today is the incomparable Rudy Sarzo, a Cuban-American musician best known for his role as the bass player for the heavy metal icons Quiet Riot on their breakout album Mental Health. Rudy is also widely known as the bass player for Ozzy Ozbourne and Whitesnake, in addition to his work with other very well-known heavy metal and hard rock bands including Dio, Blue Oyster Cult, and the Devil City Angels. Rudy is also a talented radio host and a published author, having written Off the Rails, his memoir from his days touring with Randy Rhoads on the Ozzy Ozbourne Blizzard of Oz World Tour. And today, Rudy joins us from his home in Woodland, California, to talk about his exciting career and bring us up to speed on what he's working on next. So sit back, relax, and get ready as SocialNRG now presents you with your Backstage Pass.
Our guest of honor today, Mr. Rudy Sarzo. How you doing, Rudy?
How you guys doing? I'm blessed. I'm doing terrific. Yeah.
Oh, wow, thanks a lot for being on the show, Rudy. I mean, I've only really met you once. We did a show together at the Calgary Arts thing, the big museum they have there, and you were doing some work with Sass Jordan and that whole gang, and let's see, Elias Hall as well.
Yeah, what we have is a charity organization, and it's called BANC, Benevolent Artists National Charity. It's based out of Calgary. James Carter is the president of the organization. He's like our biggest cheerleader about what we're doing. And one of the things that we get to do is actually donate money to, let's say, the National Music Center. We've been doing that for like 4 or 5 years now. And of course, we missed it this past October because of the COVID, the pandemic. And but we look forward, to hopefully this year getting back on track with that, and it's a great way for us to be able to get together and give back,
right?
Keep the music alive, because our donations to the National Music Center makes it possible for young musicians to take lessons and be part of that community.
Right. Well, we did part of Randy's Bachman's album we did there at the studio, and it's unbelievable what you can do in that place. Like
it is. I mean, I advise every person who is a music lover and from around the world to visit the National Music Center in Calgary. It's basically, it's what I understand is kind of like the Canadian Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Sort of, yeah. It's kind of like Cleveland and LA put together somehow, and New York all in one little spot. They really invested a ton of money. And for all you people that haven't seen the famous mobile recording studio, that's there. What you see, you can walk into this truck and see all the albums that were made in this truck, and it'll blow your freaking mind how many great albums were there.
Yeah,
and of course it was immortalized in the song "Smoke on the Water."
Yeah, of course. And did you have the experience of actually listening to the vinyl records through the board?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
What's really interesting, you and I being, musicians and going into recording studios, is that there's a certain imaging to the music that we create in the studio that we get a reference of the speakers that it comes through once it's being mixed.
Yes.
And somehow, some way, because music is being heard in different formats and in different appliances, devices that play back music, we get to lose the sense of how it actually was mixed and it sounded to the engineers and the musicians that created it. So listening back to the vinyl of the recordings that were made at the truck through the monitor speakers that are part of the console, it's a whole different experience.
Yeah, it's not an API. It's a special console that's in that. Do you remember the name of it?
Yes. Oh my God. It's Helio. It's a Helio board.
That's
and
right.
Those were made per order. So it wasn't like if you buy an SSL, you could, there's many SSL boards that are identical in different studios. The Helio boards were hand wired and made per order for the needs of the customer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Here's the thing that's off topic, kind of. So you do recording at home?
Yes.
Okay, so when you do recording at home, how do you reference your stuff? Just out of interest, when you're listening, because I'll tell you what I have to do to get anything that works for me.
Yeah, I don't do mixes here, and what I do is I let's say somebody asked me to record tracks for a project. I send them one DI. Right. Which is basically just going straight, and then I'll have another one with sort of like a tone. It's like a guide tone, telling them, well, if you're looking for the way that I hear the bass sounding in this track, here is an additional track with, usually I use a plug-in. Right. By Positive Grid bias effects. Also, I've been recording through the Spark amp, only if it's up 48K. Because the Spark amp, you can go USB into your let's say I like to use a laptop just for convenience sake. Yeah. And I plug it in and I use the driver and I get to record. And what's really worked for me is the fact that when I use the low latency option on my Pro Tools, I can actually I can hear without latency, the way the bass is being recorded. Because if I use plugins in Pro Tools, they don't come up. They're going to bypass once I use the low latency. So that's really a plus. Now, so as far as reference goes, I have these, they're Ultimate Ears. They're the Capitol Records reference in-ear monitors. And they're as flat as they can be. So I use these. Yeah, Capitol Records. It has a little Capitol Record logo. Oh, wow. That's what they did is they worked with the engineers at Capitol Records and created this in-ear monitor. So it's actually a pretty exact reproduction of their mixing environment.
So when let's say you're putting together tracks and you want to make it sound like a record, you're presenting at the very least a demo to somebody, you want it to sound as good. So do you mix using those?
Oh yeah. No, I basically use everything,
Yeah. Well, here's my thing is that I mix on my monitors, I mix on my headphones, and then I bring it out to my SUV and play it in the car. Yeah. Because the car always tells me the truth more than anything. There's something, I don't know. So I'll go in that car. I'll make notes. Okay, this has got to come down 3 dB. This has got to come off. This isn't even needed. Like one thing you were talking about using an amp modification thing. Like what I'll do is I'll record a DI, basically a DI through my LA610. That's sort of my bass DI that I use, and then from there I'll run it through an SVT plugin. So I've got the SVT amp track and I've got the DI track, and I've got both of those. Well, this last thing I was listening to, I ended up taking the SVT right off because somehow it made the track just way too boomy and there was no way I could get rid of it. So I just took it off and went straight with the DI and it was perfect. So it's interesting how, but other songs I would have to use the SVT to make it thick. So.
Yeah. Also, when I use the DI, I use a very soft compression. There's a company called Origin Effects, and they have these. I can show you. Let me unplug it. I got it right next to me here. It's a Cali 76.
Oh, okay.
Compressor. It's very soft. Sometimes, depending on the project, I might use a dark glass compressor, depending on the sound. But this one is a very analog sounding one, whereas the dark glass can take more of a headroom because it's made for like really aggressive metal, Right. And this is more like getting more of the analog vibe, which I love,
Well, what's your go-to studio bass these days? Is there more than one?
Let me see. Oh yeah. Yeah, it all depends on the project. I've been using this. It's a 66 Precision that Frankie Banali gave me as a gift about a year ago, and I've been using that a lot. I have a 59, but for some reason, the pickups on the 66 are more vibrant. They're not as dull the 59 is a little bit dull. Maybe it's because it's meant to be played with the flat wounds, and I only have flat wounds on my Hofner. That's about it. That's the flat wounds that
right. Like the pyramids, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The
and I used to use this Rickenbacker.
Right.
I mean, it all depends. I have Fender Jazz. I got my Spectre signature model, and it just, what I do is I cast all my basses. It might be a Thunderbird, God knows, So I record about all of the basses that I have, and I start like switching around and casting them. And once I find the personality that I think that the story needs, that's the one that I go with.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. I have a 1973 precision bass that I inherited from my high school, because I went back to the high school years and years later, and the kids had rashed it. They'd put protractors through it and carved their names in it. And so a friend of mine who I went to school with was now a teacher there. So he talked to the faculty and they gave it to me. I brought it back to Vancouver and had it all put back together again. And I put 1973 Rotosound strings on it. And so that's would have been the strings that it came with at the time. And they're still on it. That bass, I've had that bass for probably 20 years, and it's still those Rotosound strings. That particular year, the alloys are perfect.
Yeah,
same thing.
It's really interesting. I got the Rickenbacker because I was specifically going for either a McCartney era Rickenbacker tone, or I was going for a Chris Squire type tone.
Right.
And I bought it new because it was a specific color that I wanted, even though years ago, Chris Squire and I traded signature basses, and he gave me his number 3 of the signature Rickenbacker.
Right.
But anyway, so I, not until I changed the strings that it came with, and I put the Rotosounds, that I actually get the tone that I kept hearing in my ear, but I wasn't getting.
Right. Yeah. Well, apparently the 1973, 74, somewhere around there, the alloys of the Rotosound strings were perfect. And if you can get a set of those old strings, they'll last pretty much forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what's really good about my precision is that I get all the roundness without that annoying oink, oink, because I'm trying to almost get a Carol K kind of thing as well, right?
Oh yeah.
I don't want it too barky on the top. So
do you play with a pick?
Both. It depends on the song.
Yeah, me too. And I tend mostly to go with a pick because, as a matter of fact, I have my own signature model picks right here.
Oh, I can't quite see them. Ah, there it is. Beautiful.
Yeah. People ask me, oh, you know, because I talk about playing with a pick. I can't physically play with a pick live because I can't move around and play with a pick. So I play with my fingers. But when it comes to this recording, I'm sitting here and the pick, yes. That's what I use.
Okay, one more technical thing. You brought up the Spark. Now, tell me about the Spark thing. I've read about it, but I haven't tried it.
Yeah, it's sitting right next to me. It's basically what they did is they try, you know, and I say try because their goal was to create a practice amp. But once you bring in the positive grid bias effects technology into a product, it takes it beyond the practice amp. And I say practice amp because it's got like these things that I haven't even done yet because they're meant more for tutoring, you know, for beginner musicians. Okay. And I'm not saying that I can't take benefit on that because it would be really cool, and it is really cool to actually be able to go to Spotify. Let's say you can go to Spotify and you pick a song, and it would tell you on your smartphone or iPad the chords to the song.
Really?
So you can play along with it and practice along with it. I mean, there's so many features in that end, you know, for as a practice amp. But what I found out is that it's a really great interface for guitar and bass. I mean, I've recorded guitar tracks on this and there's an iCloud application that you go in and you can download other people's presets. At least it's a starting point, you know. Right. And it's just it's really beyond a practice amp.
Wow. Well, that's
I mean,
really cool. So you use that as an interface, like between your bass and the and Pro Tools?
you can use. Yeah, the only issue right now that I see is that it would only work up 48K, and I get a lot of projects at 44.
Yeah, 44.1. I talked to a lot of producer friends who like to record at 44.1 because they found that when they do bounce downs, if it goes from 48 to 41.4, is it 41.4 or 41.8? What is it? Anyway, whatever. 41.1. Yeah. When they do the bounce down, they can hear the difference. But if they record the whole thing at 44, they don't hear that difference. And it's negligible between 44 and 48K to his ears. Their ears.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough tech talk. I got to go back with you because I read Off the Rails, and I love the book, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much.
Really good. Like really good writing, and I found a lot of things quite interesting. Now, of course, it's not maybe people who don't know your whole story, but you were born in Cuba. So did your family move up to the States? Maybe let's go through that story.
Yeah, it was very simple. After the revolution, my parents moved because they didn't want to raise their family in a communist country. So we moved in 1961 to Miami, and then we were relocated to New Jersey, and then we came back down to Miami again, and then I left Florida to pursue a career in the 74, 75. Yeah.
Right, and you went to California.
Well, I wound up in California. Yeah, first I went upstate New York, and I spent time in Chicago area, and wound up in LA.
Now, wasn't there a period of time, I'm sorry if I got it wrong. I read the book a long time ago, but wasn't there a period of time, was it shortly after you started Quiet Riot that you ended up going back to New York and playing with your family band for a bit? Is that true? Or have I got the timeline wrong?
No, what happened was I ran out of money in LA. I did that. I played with my brother and my sister-in-law's band, lounge band, to make some money. And once I got the money together, I went back to LA, and that's when I joined the Randy Rhoads version of Quiet Riot.
Okay, and you and Randy Rhoads were like best friends. You guys were. He
had that personality that he was best friend to a lot that Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he really took you under his wing.
He did. Like he did. Yeah. I really owe him that he gave me the opportunity to, and recommended me to play with Ozzy Ozbourne. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not only was he a great guitar player, he came up with some of the best riffs ever in rock. Like, I mean, he was just amazing. Like, just, I don't know. It's really sad what happened. I mean, do you mind talking about it at all? I know he's a good friend. I
mean, one of the reasons why I wrote the book is so I don't have to go back to that moment in time, which the tragedy, because it's, I mean, if I'm going to talk about it, I have to go there,
Yeah, right. I gotcha.
But I like to remember Randy as not only the great human being and musician that he was, but also for I experience we in the band who were traveling together every day, we experienced a progression on Randy's musical journey that very few people did, because we didn't have the social media then that we have now. And, people complain, especially the young fans complain, wow, where's all the footage of Randy Rhoads have become this only, so little? It's because it was 1982 when he died.
Yeah.
There was no, iPhone, videotaping, taping everything that you're doing on stage every single day. No, there was not. And there was a plan to do a live recording, but he died before it happened.
Yeah. So
we have the show with Brad Gillis, who came in and finished the tour. So that's it. So but we personally experience that every single day. I mean, the way that he took the same songs every single night to a whole different level. That is something that's how I like to remember Randy for.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. You answered my question perfectly. So let's get back. So now you're in LA. You left New York you went upstate New York, you went back down, and then you went to LA, and you started playing around the clubs, and you just sort of started sitting in on jams and all that stuff. But it seems to me in the book, it seemed like you got connected very quickly, which is quite amazing in such a big city with such a roster of talent. So obviously you rose to the top of the cream, or the cream rose to the top pretty fast with you. I mean,
well, actually, let's say in retrospect, the only real connection that I made in LA was when I went to a club and I saw Quiet Riot play live for the very first time. And just like I do with any band, that I think, sometimes it's you're doing it for yourself because you're trying to let the people know and say, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing, and just keep going in that direction. That's really great. And that's it. That's all there's to it. Because they give you a performance that you really enjoy and you're paying it back.
Right.
So like, yeah, you guys were awesome. And that's it. And you just move on with life. It's not like you expect anything out of that, And that's what happened with Quiet Riot. I saw them play and I thought, wow, these guys are great. I got to tell them, And as another musician, you really appreciate it when people are, see, certain things don't happen by accident. The commitment that Quiet Riot had early on to become an arena band was evident in a club. They didn't come off as a club band, And so I know what it takes. So it's like, yeah, guys, pat in the back, keep doing it. You guys are gonna get there. And so I met Kevin. We just were bumping into each other in this club. They were off the stage, and I said, hey man, I just watched the show and you guys were great and keep it up, man. And he remembered that because I guess that was not usual thing that happened in LA because it was so competitive.
Yes, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like, oh yeah, I remember that. And he also remembered my accent. So people, when they were started looking for a bass player, I was not in town. I was in New Jersey, and there were people that kept telling, because they just basically run out of bass players locally. They auditioned everybody, and they didn't feel like they found the right guy. And so their friends kept telling Kevin, oh yeah, well, you should check out Rudy. But Rudy was out of town. Right. So he finally got my phone number, and I just happened to I already bought the tickets, and my plan was to go back to LA, and I had a date that I was going to be there, which was the next week. And so I told Kevin, oh yeah, man, yeah, definitely. I'd love to come down on audition, and I'll be there next week. I'll call you when I arrive.
Do you mind me asking, how would Kevin have your phone number? How would he find it? Because that's incredible.
Yeah, he found it through other people, through other sources,
Unbelievable. Yeah. Like that's a needle in a haystack kind of thing. I mean, he found you in New Jersey from LA.
Yeah, but they were looking for the right bass player.
Yeah, well, you certainly, not only are you a great bass player, you are the epitome of a rock star bass player. I mean, all the pictures of you. I mean, you're one of the people, even with Whitesnake, you're one of the people. I gravitated when I saw the picture of the band. I gravitated towards you, not Coverdale. There was something about your look that just looked rock star right from the beginning.
That I appreciate that. That's really kind of you. But I'm a mass communication student. That was my subject in college, and I learned things in the early 70s when I went to college that it was actually because I wanted to get into the entertainment industry. I wanted to mass communication back then was radio, television, and motion picture producing and directing. And so I learned all of that. I have my own radio show on Monsters of Rock Radio on the Dash Network. And it's a radio show. It's not, we do conversations like this, but there's music in the show, music related to the artists and so on. And so I do that. But I really wanted to get into radio or television, but the market was not ready in Miami for my generation of Cubans. It was either the older Cubans or hippies. And I
Yeah,
was
like either Ricky Ricardo or
yeah,
yeah, I got you. Yeah.
or Cheech and Chong, if
Right,
you were
gotcha,
like
yeah.
that hippie type, FM radio, playing the Fugs and playing Frank Zappa. And I'm talking about early FM, 1971.
Right.
And so I gravitated toward stay playing in bands. Locally, there was an incredible music scene, a lot of clubs, a lot of dates, that you could play and everything. But I learned so much during mass communication courses. As a matter of fact, this past year I was inducted into my college Hall of Fame.
Say that again. I missed that.
Yeah, I was inducted to the Miami-Dade College Hall
cool.
of Fame. Yeah.
Oh, no, good for you.
Yeah. So,
wow, congratulations.
So thank you. So it was really amazing that by the time that I started playing in bands in the 80s, everything that I had learned in college, I was able to apply, especially the lighting. First time I stepped on stage with Ozzy, I realized that they were using the same lighting technique as they use in a television studio.
Okay.
Everything. So I learned where to stand, always to be seen, to be aware. I would ask the lighting guy to always put like little crosses on my side of the stage, so I knew where the lights were aimed at. So I was either lit from behind or depending on if it was a darker song, I wanted to be lit from behind. If it was more of a rocking song, I want to be lit from the front to be seen.
Wow, that's an incredible amount of care and attention to detail.
Well, it's because I learned the importance of it. I learned that if you're not properly lit, you can't be seen, or your features are not as defined. Lighting is everything on stage.
Of course, yeah.
And then once we started making videos, I was making videos in our class in school. I learned behind the camera, in front of the camera, how to do that. Like right now, I have a light on that you can see it's no good.
Yeah.
Now I turn it on. See, you can see me better, and I have backlighting. Just filling me in like that. And I know what angle to be at, not completely straight like that, but just semi-profile, so you can see features and my expression.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. I could take a tutorial from you.
Well, I mean, this is something that I guess that we gravitate towards. The more videos we make and the more times we spend on YouTube, we learn from that on our own. But back then, there was no such thing as YouTube. So people really see themselves more now than ever.
Yes.
We're looking at mirrors,
Yeah. I mean, look at kids on Facebook. I mean, everybody looks like a fashion model. All the girls look like fashion models. All the guys look like badasses.
And they know what their best angle is when they do the selfie and the fish face and all of that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them, what they do is they take a film. They'll take a film of themselves and they'll go through the film until they get the right thing, and then they freeze it, and that's their picture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do that.
Yeah. Now, were your parents musical?
Musicians? No.
But were they musical?
Well, they played the radio. That's all.
Oh, really? Okay. But yet what'd you say? Your brother was a musician. You're a musician.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we had an inclination towards music. And when I say an inclination, it's because, becoming a professional musician for any kid back in the early 60s, that was far-fetched.
Yeah.
It really was far-fetched, especially rock and roll. Rock and roll, I started playing by ear before the Beatles played in Ed Sullivan, and my references were like country music. That was it. Jimmy Dean show, and of course later Hee Haw, but country music that was just rocking. I mean, rockabilly. That's country.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those country guitar players to this day blow my mind. They're so clean and so
I love it.
Unbelievable. Have you seen this kid named Joe Robinson on the internet? He's a young Australian guy. He's 27 years old. You've never heard a kid play guitar like this. It's like he'll play acoustic or electric guitar, all styles, and his dexterity in his attack and his approach, and it's just he's doing everything you've ever heard of. It's just amazing. It's like, but the kids have, like we talked about. You were saying about YouTube and things like that. Now they've got this reference that's miles and miles and miles long to learn from. Not only are they hearing the records, like back when we were kids, it was always, remember, move the needle, trying to figure out what's going on, and you slow down the record. Now there's every tool under the sun to figure out what's going on. Plus you can watch the guys play it,
Yeah. But to me, ultimately, it's what you create, not what you recreate, and it all comes down to songs.
Yes. And so, okay, which brings me back to Quiet Riot. So Kevin Dubrow, is that how you pronounce it? Is it Dubrow? Dubrow. So when he took note of the fact that you would actually come up to him in the middle of this LA scene where everybody was kind of trying to one up each other and they would never pat each other on the back. You made an impression. You say it might have been your accent, but it's probably just because you were such a genuine human being. And he went, wow, this guy might have something. He obviously knew you were a bass player. Now, had you played, you must have played around LA before you went back to New Jersey.
One time.
One time?
One show, yeah.
And from that, people told Quiet Riot about you?
Well, I mean, we had a lot of rehearsals and we had a very small network of people. And there's a place called the Rainbow Bar and Grill.
Right.
That people hang out at. That was our social network, and you had to go there every night because you never knew when an opportunity would be there,
right,
to meet people and stuff like that. So there was a lot of networking going on. But as far as making that impression in the music scene, no, because I only played once.
Wow.
But I knew a lot of musicians because we will hang. And when you hang, you get to know how people play.
Right. Now, so you go to New Jersey. Now you come back to play with Quiet Riot. Mm-hmm. Now I'm a little bit confused about the timeline. You guys didn't do Mental Health then. There was an album before that, correct?
Well, there were 2 records that were released on Sony Japan that were actually only done for the Japanese market, not for the American market. Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you guys tour over there?
No. Never toured there. Those records were never released officially at that time in the United States. So it was like we didn't exist in America.
Okay, fair enough. Which is actually kind of a good way to do it in a way, because you can cut your teeth and really figure out how it works. So now I'm off on a tangent here. Was Spencer Proffer was he the producer?
No, for Mental Health he was.
Yeah. Okay. For Mental Health, he was. Okay.
Yeah, because I know it was his label. It was his production company, publishing.
Yeah, because he recorded a couple of bands from Canada, Streetheart, and I think Kick Hacks. I think they may have worked with Spencer Proffer as well, right around that same time. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so you released those songs. Now, at that point, you leave Quiet Riot, right? There's a period where you leave Quiet Riot and then come back.
Oh, what happened was Randy left to join Ozzy.
Oh, okay.
So that was pretty much the end of that.
Okay, and then so
there was a splinter. Yeah, there was a splinter band called Dubrow that Kevin kept going, just to write songs. And I moved in with him. I was living with Kevin. So to pay the rent, I would play in Dubrow, but I was also a member of a band called Angel.
You were an Angel too. That's right. Yeah. Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, very short period because I joined Ozzy right after that. Yeah.
Well, Angel, they were signed to Casablanca, Kiss's label, right?
I was there once they got dropped.
Oh,
we didn't have a deal. Yeah.
Well, I remember. Okay, maybe you might have some insight on this. This is way off in a tangent, but I find it interesting. Mm-hmm. I remember hearing things that Angel were experimenting with holograms live, where they were using holograms on stage.
That's way back in the money. Yeah, that's
this is back in like 77, 78.
Yeah, that's when they had money to do productions like that. But once I joined the band, they had lost the deal and there was no budgets. Yeah.
So what I guess what I'm getting at is what were they doing with these holograms? So what were they doing? Like, how were they enhancing the performance using holograms? What were they doing with them? Do you remember?
No, I have no idea. I didn't see any of their shows with the hologram. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just thought maybe you'd have an inside thing, but okay. So, okay, now I gotta follow this. You've been with so many successful groups. It's hard to follow. It's unbelievable how in demand you were almost from the beginning. Once you got into Quiet Riot, it seemed like everybody wanted you. It seems like every album that for the next 10 years you were on, or 15 years.
Yeah, I'm blessed to have played on 5 consecutive multi-platinum records in the 80s, in less than, from 81 to 90. Yeah, so in about 9 years I did that. Yeah.
Unbelievable. So you go from Quiet Riot. Now Quiet Riot, you went to Ozzy, right? But
yeah. Now, to me, that's the beginning of my touring recording career, because 40 years ago, almost to the day. Yeah.
Right. Now it's time for a celebration. Maybe that's why you got that honorary thing from your school.
Who knows? They're just running out of people, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's still an honor, no matter how they came across it. But I'm sure that's quite humble of you. So from Quiet Riot into Ozzy, from Ozzy, what was the transition? Now, Ozzy, did you stayed with Ozzy after Randy passed away?
Well, we finished the tour,
right? Yeah. And then from there, what happened with you at that point?
Well, I mean, once Randy passed away, it was very painful to continue playing in the band, and so I was invited.
That must have been an awful tour to continue.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you just don't leave, just about the biggest band in the world at the time for a band like Quiet Riot, who it was the complete unknown. I mean, it's all I knew was that I really enjoy. Again, I found the joy of making music again, playing with Frankie and Kevin and Carlos.
And that's so. Out of Ozzy, you went back to Quiet Riot.
Yeah, what is known as the Mental Health.
And that's when Mental Health hit, and that's when you guys hit big time.
Yeah, I know. As my opinion, as an insider, somebody who was in the band, in both bands, it was a completely different band. What really tied it in from one to the other was that Kevin was the singer, and then once I came back, I was a former member of Quiet Riot. But it was completely different sound, completely different band. So it could have been called anything.
Mm-hmm. But it was the first metal album that go #1 in Billboard.
Well, this is what it was. It was the first debut by a metal album.
Oh, okay.
To go to #1.
I love the stories in your book when you talk about meeting Ozzy and Sharon and going to their house for the first time, and the communal breakfasts and all that stuff. The stories are absolutely wonderful. I really think people should pick up the book. That whole section I found really, because I mean, literally you sort of came from sleeping on, was it Kevin's floor you were sleeping on?
Yeah, Kevin's apartment. Yeah, he had a guest room, and I slept on a sheet.
Wow.
On a sheet it had quite shag carpeting. Thank God for the 70s.
Yeah. And then from there, you end up in this palatial place with guest houses and stuff.
Yeah.
Like overnight.
Yeah. Basically, I wound up there because I couldn't get a ride back to to Kevin's place. So they say pick a bungalow. Basically, they were just like a row of bungalows, and I just picked one, and that was it. And I stayed there.
Wow.
Did you stayed there for the duration? Yeah.
Yeah. So that became your home, basically.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I was on the road with Ozzy and everybody, including Sharon, the band, in the same bus, and then we would get off the bus, and I would go and stay with them.
Wow. No, that's and so you were treated really well.
Oh my God, yes, fantastic.
And so Ozzy, good guy. Sharon, good person.
Sharon's excellent people.
Sharon's dad comes off as a bit of a badass.
Well, they all were in that scene. I mean, we're talking about, the music scene in the 50s and 60s. I mean, here's a man who was promoting. Later on, he promoted, the 60s rock bands, but before that, he was Gene Vincent's manager in England,
Right.
and promoter.
That's right.
And that circuit, and it was pretty tough. I mean, it's common knowledge that early rock and roll was transitional to that the people that ran the business were actually mafia.
Yeah, mobsters. Mm-hmm.
Mobsters, yeah. And, the whole jukeboxes and, and record companies and publishing deals and all that, so it had its birth there.
Now, I don't know how prevalent it is now, but a friend of mine back in the late 80s, early 90s, he was road managing. He doesn't do that anymore. He basically runs his own touring company, but he was road managing and doing some shows in New York. And he's like a mind, like a computer. He can balance books to a nickel, just to always, no matter how big the tour. And so he said it was the first time working in New York. And he sat down, and they're doing it's post show, and they're doing the final tally and stuff. And he's going, okay, this yours, it's yours, okay, everything's good. And there's a guy standing behind him. He goes, I think you might have forgotten something here. He says, pardon me, and he's also very proud. He knows his numbers are on. So he became quite indignant, saying, I don't want to mention his name because I don't want to get him in trouble. But anyway, so he says, what are you talking about? My numbers are these numbers are perfect. He says, no, I think you may have missed something here. And the guy pulls back his shirt, and he's wearing a piece. He's got a gun. And all of a sudden he went, oh. So in New York, up until that point, there was still mafia involvement on shows where you had to, part of your tour was you had to pay these guys off and write it off so that the government wouldn't know about it, and write it off into some sort of weird extraneous expenses. Yeah. And I remember I found it really ironic that he was saying, he says, oh yeah, he says, if McCartney plays New York, that has to happen. He says, that's all the way up the board, Oh
yeah, well, I've never experienced that personally, but I play the Garden enough times, Madison Square Garden, to know that when you play there, you just do it as a status type of show, right? Because you can say, hey, we sold out the Garden, but you're not going to make any money because of it's a very tough venue to get in and out. So you're going to go into extra time with the union, and it's a union building. You cannot touch anything unless a union representative either is there with you or is actually handling it. So It's a very slow in, and it's very slow out.
Well, so what's your take on Billy Joel? I mean, he sells out Madison Square Gardens once a month now. That's his house gig. So
yeah, which makes sense because I'm talking about if you're doing one show,
yeah,
the in and the out is going to cost you what you're going to make playing there. But if you do multiple shows, you amortize that.
Yeah, and
you actually do make a lot of money.
Right. Wow. So it's like if you're like Elton John and selling out 5 or 7 nights, he's made a ton of dough. But yeah, those in and out costs, I see what you mean. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like the upfront stuff sort of negates all the money that you would have made on a one-nighter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, exactly. I mean, that happens. I mean, a friend of mine was playing in a very prevalent Canadian band who sold out the Edmonton Coliseum, which was, I think when you sell it out as a concert, it's probably upwards of 17,000 people. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the night, because it was basically a one-off and they had to rent the PA and lighting and all that stuff, by the end of the night, I think they made a couple $100 each after selling out 17,000 seats. Everybody thinks you're a big rock star. You're going home with less money than the people that were in the crowd. Yeah. Insane. But, okay. So tell me about your days with touring the Mental Health album. Because because now you've come out of Ozzy. Now, I hope my intuition is right. When you came into, like with Ozzy, it's sort of Ozzy's band, and you're part of the band, but you're also more sideman status. Whereas with Quiet Riot, you're a part of the team. Is that sort of more what it was like?
Yeah, that was exactly what it's like. I mean, come on, I wasn't going to leave Ozzy to be a sideman with a band that had no future. It just
Yeah,
didn't make any sense.
yeah, and it definitely worked in your favor because that album did so well.
Well, in hindsight.
Yeah, yeah. You didn't know it at the time.
I just the only reason why I started playing with what is known as the mental health version of Quiet Riot was because I was happy making music.
Yes.
That was it. Yeah.
And what was Ozzy doing at that time? Had he started a new band without you guys?
Well, yeah, since I wasn't there, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I do know that he has continued to play.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Okay. You got me there. All right. So the mental health, and so how long does that whole session last with mental health? Because out of Quiet Riot is when from there you go to Whitesnake, right? I'm trying to follow the timeline here. Like I said, it's so difficult. Later. You played with so many bands.
Yeah. This is what happened. Actually, I did a session that was just going to be for one song. And since I was very familiar with the song called Thunderbird, as a tribute to Randy Rhoads, I was still a member of Ozzy. And I was just waiting to play that song. And we had enough time in the session that had been booked to play for me to record 4 more songs. So I left that session either with 4, maybe 5 songs already recorded, because those were songs that one of them was Slick Black Cadillac. The rest were Dubrow songs that I already knew from playing with Kevin and Dubrow.
Right.
And so I left, and I left for New York the following day to New York City and recorded with Ozzy the Speak of the Devil record.
Okay.
At the Ritz. And then by the time that I came back, I had given it plenty of thought and made the decision to leave Ozzy and officially join what is known as the Mental Health Quiet Riot. And so then I went back in and I finished the record. Before I even did my initial session with Quiet Riot, there had been another bass player, Chuck Wright, who recorded the song Mental Health, which is the title track,
right,
and Don't Want to Let You Go. And he's on the record, and he's credited on the back of the record, but I play on the rest of the album. So when I came back, I finished the record. I came back and I recorded on Come and Feel the Noise, Breathless, and maybe one more song. And that was it. And so basically I recorded both records, Speak of the Devil and Mental Health, within the same 3-week period.
You have had a very, very successful marriage as well through all this.
Yeah, 36 years. Yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable. Like, that's just something that's relatively unheard of. I hate to say it because it shouldn't be that way, but it is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you guys, when did you meet?
1981, September 1981. Yeah.
And so was that pre-Ozzy or? Oh,
no, that was during the Ozzy period.
It was Ozzy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, I'm having a hard time with the timeline because, like I said, there's so much you've done. I mean, you've had enviable careers on so many different bands that it's hard to believe that any one person could be part of all that's like magic, But anyway, so now we're getting back to when did you did some work with Yngwie Malmsteen too?
Yeah, I got called. I got a lot of calls, to do tours and stuff like that, play on records, and when, as a matter of fact, you mentioned Dio. I only did like a 6-week tour with Yngwie to promote his Attack record. He plays bass on most of his recordings.
Okay. So
yeah, I didn't get to play. You're just basically playing bass too, because he can't do 2 things at once. He hasn't figured that out yet. Someday he might. So I actually got the call to join Dio and play on the record Master of the Moon while I was on tour with Yngwie. But I couldn't just walk away, and leave him without a bass player in Vegas, in the middle of the tour. I've never done anything like that. It's like that's beyond anything I would ever do. And so I waited until I was done with my commitment to Inve, and then I reached out again to Dio and his management, to Ronnie, and then I joined the band. But I lost on the opportunity of recording on the album.
Now, probably much the same way where you toured with Blue Oyster Cult. I've done a few tours with those guys as well. Mm-hmm. So you just sort of filled in a chair for a period of time. Is that correct?
Actually, I filled in a chair of people who fill in a chair, because there have been many bass players since their last record.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and I was just one of many. Yeah,
that was one thing that blew my mind when I remember playing with Blue Oyster Cult, and they did "Don't Fear the Reaper," but they did it. It's the only time I've ever heard a band play the song in a higher key live, and it's because I asked them, "Why are you doing that?" He says, "Because the vocal is so low, it doesn't cut through the mix unless you raise the key of the song live."
Yeah, it's really amazing. Eric and Buck. Up until then, because of the genre of music that I did, it was in Quiet Riot. We had this tuning that turned out to be 432 that Kevin heard naturally in his ear before it was a fad.
Yeah, because I've heard about that.
Yeah, so we used to tune in between E and E flat. Turned out to be 432, and so. And then with other bands, we tuned down flat because that was kind of like the sound of metal at the time and so on. Or if you had a keyboard player in the band, that's the only thing that kept you from tuning down.
Right.
But as time went on, keyboards became available with detuning capability. So you can tune your keyboard to whatever, tune it down, So when I started playing with Oyster Cult, it was actually the first band that I started playing with again that was tuned to concert pitch, A440. And it was amazing because to me, the tension on the strings and the way that the instrument is built, like Fenders, they're really built, to play naturally at a certain tuning,
yes,
tension-wise, and strings and so on. Now we have different variations of string gauges, so we can actually, compensate. If you're going to tune down to D, you had to get a heavier string set.
Rudy, I got a quick question for you.
What's that? Go ahead.
So you're talking a lot of technical setups and stuff like that. Do you manage your own gear, or do you have a guy that works for you that's been with you for a long time that looks after your stuff?
Since I'm very in tune and sensitive to my needs, whether it is tonal or tension on the strings or everything, I do it all myself.
Okay.
I was going to say, the A440 thing that's been a thing that's always kind of bothered me. I've had a hard time there's times when I played with bands where they'll tune down to like an E flat or sometimes even a D, which is really insane to me. But I always have a hard time with that. It bothers my ear. And I don't know if I don't know if I have perfect pitch, but I know when I'm not playing A440. And I can hear, like, I can tune my guitar out of thin air. I can tune it to almost perfect A440 every time. But I've always had, but you touched on that the 432 thing. There was a big thing going around the internet back a few years ago where they were changing the pitch of songs to 432 and apparently saying that it sounds like somehow thicker and better, Yeah,
it all has to do basically. I don't know if you ever got into the golden ratio and what is it? Was it Pythagoras was the father of the scale?
The Pythagorean theorem?
Yeah, all of that. That's how we got the scale, that based on frequencies. And 432 was the frequency that was used up until, I believe, Puccini. Puccini was the last composer who actually had to make the transition of the tuning for his orchestra. So if you listen to Bach today, unless it's tuned down to 432, you're not going to hear the real way that the music was supposed to sound like. because Mozart, Bach, all that was tuned down. We didn't have 440 as the standard.
Well, who won the bet when 440 became what's called concert pitch?
Well, there is some kind of an organization that got together and said, this is going to be the new pitch, the universal pitch, A440. And there's some conspiracies involved that I'm not even going to get into that, because it's like, having to do with politics and certain,
right,
politics, basically. Yeah. I mean, for anybody that's listening to this, and just Google it, and there's plenty of stuff to drive you crazy if you want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I know. I think I'm going to revisit it, because I remember a friend of mine must have been 4 or 5 years ago, when he was sending me these things to listen to, because it seemed to be the going rage at the time on Facebook and these sort of things, where people were talking about this tuning that's better than 440. That's what they were basically touting it as, So, and you discovered back then, you guys were doing it basically because it just sounded better to your ear.
Well, this is what happened. We had this is 1983. So we didn't have the tuners that we have today that we just clip on, or Boss pedals. We had this Korg tuner that had a pitch wheel, like woo, right? Yeah. And so, of course, it had a little line, which was A, but right. Kevin liked it a little bit off, and he would listen to it and say, yeah, that's the pitch. So it was not really right on spot with that, right? It turned out to be 432, because we kept that same tuning when, I don't know if you remember, Korg made these rack mountable tuners that have these lights, right?
Yeah.
I had to put a piece of tape at the very end of the row of lights, 2 pieces of tape, and that would be my tuning spot. Yeah. And so they called us, because this is back in 97 with Quiet Riot, when we reunited in 97. Wow. The technology was advanced, that we had these tuners on stage that our sound went right through it, bypassed, and then just go straight into the amplifiers. Yeah.
So explain why the tape was there. I don't understand.
Well, just so we can easily find it, and not have to deal with this, because if you wanted to tune to A440, the middle light would be the one that was on.
Right.
And we were doing a lot of outdoor sheds in the summertime, so it was kind of like, it was very hard to see that faint red LED. So we put the tape and right there.
That's funny.
And if you want to hear something beyond that, is the fact that if you're playing in a festival, because we, in 97, there were kind of like the slow return of the 80s bands, right? So the best way for us to tour was to do sheds, like 10,000 seat or something like that, and have like 4 or 5 bands, then at a low ticket price, so people would show up. But it meant that bands like Quiet Riot would be like second or third on the bill, and it was still daylight in the summertime,
right.
So we would be sandwiched between these bands that were in normal tuning. It would be like, A440 or E flat.
Right.
Okay. When we came on, we sounded like we were out of tune, because everybody had been listening to music for the last couple of hours.
Right.
At a certain tuning. Then we come on and we go like, wow, this sounds awful. I mean, because I was hearing the other bands, when I was off on the side of the stage. But by the second or third song, everything sounds normal again, because the ear gets acclimated.
Well, I remember listening to the first Van Halen albums when they came out, and of course realizing that it wasn't in A440, but it also wasn't in E flat for some songs. And I'd heard on an article, or read an article somewhere, where Eddie had said something about, well, I just tune my guitar and the band tunes to me. Mm-hmm. So if that's where my guitar is tuned for that session, that's where we stay. So it's not necessarily E flat. It's not necessarily A440. It's not, it's wherever my guitar feels best that day. And then Michael Anthony tunes to that, and that's what we do. And that was pre-keyboard stuff, of course.
Well, that's very old school. We used to do that in clubs. I mean, that's how, Van Halen was one of those bands that transitioned from really nurturing, getting their act together in clubs, and I did that. I mean, when my club days, especially in Florida, we used to like tune on stage with harmonics. Give me an A. Turn to the guitar player on the other side of the stage, and he'll do the harmonic, and you go like boom, try to tune, and people are yelling, and there's still the disco music going on the speakers. It's whatever.
And I remember reading a book, Jeff Emmerich's book, and they were talking about how their biggest challenge, because they kept hearing these sounds coming out of the U.S., with the Wrecking Crew and this sort of thing, where they're going, how are they getting this bass sound? And that was their biggest thing. McCartney and Jeff Emmerich worked for like days on every album to get the bass more dominant in the mix, the way it was out of North America. They succeeded because they ended up getting a sound that was unique to them even.
Yeah, very unique. And I got to tell you, I use the Hofner a lot in certain recordings that I do. I mean, they have to be specific, melodic, and have certain instruments in it, more acoustic, string, less saturation, and all of that. And I got to tell you, nothing sounds like a Hofner bass. Yeah. Nothing.
Well, a guy that I work with has a 1964.
Oh, wow.
He bought it. He bought it when we were kids. He bought it in 1975 for $125.
Wow.
He's still got it. I mean, and it's as mint as it gets. There's a little wear out thing just above the bass pickup, but the rest of it is in really good shape. And it plays incredibly well. But he's got round mounds on it. I keep wanting him to get pyramids, because that's the sound,
Yeah, that is the sound. Yeah. But
I think he bought it with the round mounds on it. I think that I think he's just kept them on after all these years.
Yeah, but definitely the flats is the sound, and a pick.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, McCartney played with his fingers, but usually just with the slow songs. His faster stuff was always a pick.
Yeah.
But what an innovative guy. That's a guy I could talk about for hours. Just like he blows my mind. I can't believe where he came from. Well, he was thinking so far beyond anybody else. Well, him and Brian Wilson. I mean, Brian Wilson is just like, what a genius.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The bass notes against the chords that they use, it's like, I'm going, where does this come from? Like, how can your mind be that vast musically? Yeah. And they are. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about God Only Knows.
Yeah. That's the one.
It's like, it makes me resonate.
Yeah.
There's a certain something going on in there harmonically that is just like mind-boggling.
I know. That song changed everybody's lives, I think. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So you've actually got a couple of signature basses, do you not? Sawtooth.
Yes, I do.
And it's the Euro 4, I think.
I've had a few in the past, but currently I have an acoustic signature bass by a company called Sawtooth, which is a phenomenal instrument, and Spectre. Now Spectre is kind of like, with Fender. When you have a signature model with a company like Fender or Spectre, you're pretty much kind of like adding a spin on something that is a legacy instrument. You don't want to change it too much, So the Spectre, pretty much the only, and my original signature Spectre, the body shape changed a little bit, but it remained with the same dimensions, But it was easier access to the top frets.
Was there something specific you were looking for when you're going into that process, or?
Yeah, but my signature model, the company is about 20 minutes from where I live. So I can go there and work with them on the design and get it done, get a prototype and immediately check it and tell the factory to make certain adjustments and things like that. Now, when you're dealing with, let's say, Spectre, the instruments are made in different locations. And unless you happen to be working with the New York factory, which is outside of Woodstock. Me living in LA, it was a very slow process because I did the adjustments at NAMM. So they will meet with them at NAMM for an hour or half hour, talk about the instrument, and then wait for that instrument to be manufactured, sent to me, make whatever changes or approval, then it goes back to them. So it would not be until the following year when you might see the instrument again, because the factory is in the Czech Republic.
Oh, wow.
Really far away. So even shipping stuff, was like, it would take forever and very expensive way of doing it.
Are you happy with the outcome?
Yes, I'm very happy with it. It took about 2 or 3 NAMM shows, 2 or 3 years to get it done. But yeah, extremely happy with it. My first model had the Sims pickups, and the latest incarnation of my model has the Fishman Fluence pickups, which is it's not just the pickup; it's a whole system. It has the preamp and the pickups. And one of the challenges that I found with the Sims is that I love the Sims, but what happened is people would request different preamps because it's a passive active pickup, and so you could add any preamp to it. It was not part of a system like the Fluence is a complete system, So right. when you design a sound, a tone, that's what every bass is going to have. Every signature bass that comes out and goes to the store is going to be exactly like what I play. With the Sims, there was a lot of variations, and it's good because it just makes everything more agnostic as far as the choices that you have for preamps and how do you want it to color the specific tone of the person who buys the bass.
Right.
You had a Cirrus bass at one point too from Peavey, right?
Yes, I did. I had the first version, which was my signature model, and then I had a signature off the Cirrus, which was a continuation of my original bass.
So, anybody have any questions for Rudy aside from me and Scott?
Yeah, I've got one. So, Rudy, I mean, we've talked a lot about music, but you've got a whole other career that you do in animation, correct? You're a senior level 3D animator.
Yeah, I've been trained, of course. Training in animation is something that you have to do on a daily basis because technology advances so much.
Right.
So my training kind of stopped maybe 10 years ago, but at least I understand the lingo. I'm involved in an animation project that is music centric, and every time I get together with a production company and with the other animators and modelers and people that create the sets and production, I understand the lingo, so I'm not lost. I'm right there with them, but I am not currently animating anything or creating any CG content, even though I understand it and I appreciate it and I'm a fan. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I never touched on this. How was it? How did the connection to the Guess Who happen?
Oh, 6 degrees. Okay, I was doing a tour with a version of Queensryche with Jeff Tate.
That's right. You were in Queensryche too. There's another one.
Well, I was not in Queensryche. I was in the Jeff Tate version. There were 2 Queensryche going on at the same time.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's only one Queensryche, and it was like when they were all together, every single member, But that's a different story. I'm talking, as far as somebody who appreciates music, So Sass Jordan was brought in to do the part of Sister Mary because we were doing the whole record, the whole Operation Mindcrime record live. Okay. And she was also the opening act. So she came on, she did her set, and then later on she joined us during Operation Mindcrime. So we became best friends, and then when one day I get a call from Derek Sharp, her husband. Husband. And it says, Seth gave me your number, and you're looking for a bass player because Jim is doing less shows, and and so on. So he asked me if I wanted to do it. I said, of course. You know, I'm a fan. I was playing those songs back in high school.
Yeah.
But now I'm playing them better.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, Sash Jordan, what a great voice that girl's got.
You know, I love
well,
Sash.
Derek too. Derek's a great singer.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. All those guys are great. You know, and you know, getting to play with Gary, you know, the guy who recorded all those records. For me as a bass player, that's such a treat because usually I don't do that. Usually when I join a band, it's like generations of drummers. Right. You know.
Yeah. And Gary's a good guy too. I like him. Yeah.
So I had a question. So Rudy, you've had such an incredible longevity in your career, and it's a space with so much intensity, and people tend to fall out of it. What has kept you grounded through this, and what's allowed you to have such a long career in the industry?
Well, the grounding is, you know, always coming from a place of gratitude and having a spiritual center, and you know, knowing, you know. To put it in a nutshell, God is my agent manager.
Love it. Love it. Can I ask what your particular, I'm a very spiritual person myself, what's your particular sort of philosophy?
Well, I'm Christian. I was raised Catholic. I'm a Christian. But I also listen to, you know, to other teachings.
Sure.
Because they all lead to one place, you know. Any teaching that will get you closer to finding out God's will, you know, it's all taking you in the right path.
Love it. Oh,
yeah, I was really surprised in your book on how early in your career you became spiritually awakened.
Yeah, and if you notice, I just mentioned it once. Yeah. Because I figure I'm not going to get preachy. This is not what the book is about. But if I'm going to write about my, you know, things that were going on at the time, I must express this.
It has to be told, of course.
It has to be told. It has to be told.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because if I don't tell how low I was, the reader would never really get to understand my gratitude.
Right.
They just think, oh, this happened and that happened. There's no buildup. There's no arc to the journey.
Yeah.
So what would your advice be for musicians that are getting started and they really want to make it and they want to do well and they want to have a long career? What would you tell them? Yeah.
Well, it's specifically for a business person. And I'm not talking about, if you're talking about personal spiritual growth, that's even deeper than that. But as far as sustaining a career in the business, number one factor, because obviously everybody at a certain level is a musician, and there's a line of people that can do the job, but there's only very few that can be trusted. And the trust factor then becomes the most important aspect that you can bring into something.
When you say trust, what does that mean? Like, just for our listeners and that, so they get a better understanding.
Just, you know, being a professional. You know, once you get to be a professional, you don't get to be a professional because you're not trusted. You know, by trust, I means, you know, once you're either join a band as an equal or brought in as a support person, a side person, it's the same principle. You have to be trusted that you're going to show up, not disappear, not be a jerk on the tour bus, always represent the band on and off stage with dignity. Because, you know, let's say, you know, we are in the circuit that we do a lot of casinos. And to me, there's nothing more really personal than playing in a place where you're staying in the same hotel, you're playing in the casino, the audience that you're going to be playing for, you're going to be sitting next to them at a table in a restaurant. You're going to be in the elevator. You're going to be walking around, and the person's going to recognize you because your posters all over the casino. You know, so you're basically you're representing the band and you're representing the venue that has hired the band to perform there. So you have to really, you cannot be, you cannot be that guy in the bar that starts a fight with one of the customers that probably bought a ticket to your show, who's staying probably in the room next to you. You can't be that guy. You have to be, you have to be respectful, and you have to be dignified, and that's a reflection on your band.
And you touched about personal, professional loyalty, like you're talking about David Coverdale, like the sort of countdown to the end of the tour. In other words, so he's giving you the respect that it's not like, hey, by the way, this is our last gig. You know what I mean? Which can happen.
Oh yeah.
So that's the thing. That's that whole professional way of dealing with all that stuff. And you're right. There's a lot of people that can do the job, but there's two things. Can that person gel with other people and not be an arrogant person? And number two, is that person, like you say, professionally that way, where they're actually looking out for each other and representing the product.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Really great advice. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Rudy.
But anyway, I think we're pretty much done here. This has been a fantastic interview. I really appreciate your time, Rudy. I know you're a really busy guy, and I know it was great to get you. You were actually the first person on my list out of all the people to interview.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah. So because I knew that you would have lots to talk about. So and thank you for sharing everything with us.
Yeah,
what a storied career.
I must commend you guys on the quality of the conversation we're having, because a lot of times the quality is not as professional as your show is.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate that. Well, hopefully we can get you back. I'd love to have you back.
I'd love to be back.
Yeah,
I look forward to seeing you guys soon up there in.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Come on up, hang up in Hollywood North, as we call it. It's so much. Thanks so much for joining us today, Rudy.
Take care, Rudy. Appreciate it. Bye now.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us. Check out our many other episodes and vignettes for more great content. And please like, share, and subscribe. And become a member at SocialNRGPresents.com to access all our content and earn valuable energy points just for watching.